Well, good evening, everybody. And it's lovely to be back. I know I have missed a few Tuesdays, what with holidays and other activities and things that are going on. So it's really, really nice to be back talking to you and recording this also for my YouTube channel and podcast that goes onto my website. And today I wanted to talk about brain health and in particular Alzheimer's. Some fresh information came to light and it made me realize that it's not an area that I tend to talk about very often, but it's no less important than everything else that I talk about with regards to our overall health and the body. And one of the things that came to light is an ONS, Office of National Statistics, which is the UK, that records all important statistical information for the nation. It came to light that dementia and Alzheimer's were the leading cause of death in 2022. So it's a shocking statistic. We know it's on the increase. I think I read that 2 million people by 2051 will have dementia. And of dementia, 60 to 80% is considered to be Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a particular disease that leads to dementia symptoms. So I'm specifically talking about Alzheimer's, but do recognize there is a big overlap when we think about supporting brain health and helping to protect against brain diseases and conditions like dementia generally. Now, something that I'm aware of and have been for some time because of the field that I'm in and the opportunity I get to go to really important seminars and conferences is a US physician, neurologist, I think he's a neurologist, known as Dr. Dale Bredesen, spelt Bredesen, B-R-E-S-E-D-E-N, but pronounced Bredesen, Dr. Dale Bredesen. He's got several books and he's done some most remarkable studies and protocols, not only helping to minimize symptoms of Alzheimer's, but actually, according to his own words, and I'm not making any claims here, but to reverse Alzheimer's. Now, I'm not making those claims. I have to be very careful what I say. I'm using his own words as an American physician, saying that through his own protocols, he has reversed Alzheimer's. And when I looked at some of the things that he recommends in his protocols, it made me realize that much of what he talks about is very much what I use in my naturopathic approaches, the things I teach that are so important for healthy aging. And in fact, many of these things I covered at my retreat days. My last retreat day was a few weeks ago in June. One of the reasons why I didn't go live is because I was busy preparing for my retreat the following day. So I just wanted to share and refresh some of these thoughts and activities, which are not complicated, but we tend to overlook them. They seem far too simplistic, some of these things, but collectively, and it is this sort of collective approach that we have to take. All of these are vitally important when we want to take care of our overall health, to ensure that we age healthily for our overall body. But specifically tonight, I'm discussing these points because of the impact, according to Dr. Dale Bredesen and his own protocols, of why all of these are so important to help protect yourself from Alzheimer's. So number one is thinking about our essential fatty acid intake and essential fatty acid intake ratios. What I'm talking about here are these fats that are called essential because the body cannot make them, has to get them from the diet. But we know today that actually our ratios between omega-3 and omega-6 is completely skewed. At one time we used to think that it should be perhaps a 1-to-1 ratio. Even if we could achieve less than 1-to-1 of omega-6 to omega-3, it would be considered good. When we think that typically, this might have changed, but the last time I looked, is typically the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 was 20-to-1, and the ratio should probably be more like 1-to-1. And what we're talking about here when we think about omega-3 is some very specific essential fats that are derived from omega-3 but can be found directly in oily fish, which are fats known as EPA and DHA, which are very important to brain health. You know, the brain is 60 to 70% of these fats. DHA is very important for the structure of the brain, and EPA for the functioning of the brain. So collectively, they're very important. But the conversion of omega-3 to omega-6 is very poor, about 10%. So we need a direct intake of these EPA, DHA fats that are found naturally in oily fish. We need about 3 portions a week. And what we need to do is to make sure we choose our fish quite carefully, because our seas are quite polluted. So this is where things get quite complicated. So we need to be thinking of ensuring we get salmon from wild Alaskan sources. Do not choose farm salmon, because that can be quite toxic when you read into what some farm salmon is really like. We need to avoid tuna, which has high levels of heavy metals because it is a big fish, even though it might be oily. And we should be eating mackerel and sardines. So, you know, 3 portions a week is what we should be aiming for. Most people don't tend to get nearly enough. If you're vegan, vegetarian, you don't. If you don't like oily fish, you won't be either. And they're essential because the body cannot make them and has to get them from its diet. So then we need to be thinking about our supplement choices, making sure we get really good quality supplements. And by that, you want to be looking at the labels to make sure they are checking the fish that they use in the supplements and fish oils for purity and for contaminant levels, or choosing algae sources of EPA, DHA. If you're not getting them from your essential fats. So that's the first one. I've gone on about that quite a bit, but it's really, really important when we're thinking about brain health to be thinking about omega-3, EPA, DHA fats and oily fish. But moving on from that, still on the fat level, is thinking about minimizing some of the omega-6, but actually avoiding a lot of oils that come from omega-6 sources. These oils go rancid when we heat them. They produce a lot of free radicals. Free radicals damage our cells, so they damage including our brain, and they particularly damage mitochondria, which are the powerhouses. This is what creates energy in every cell in the body, and we have a lot of mitochondria in the brain. The brain needs a lot of energy to do its job, so we need to really be careful. Are we eating or using vegetable oils, sunflower, safflower, corn, soya oils? We should avoid them, absolutely avoid these. They are pro-inflammatory, they damage our cells, they create what was called oxidative stress in the body and in the brain, so avoid them. The second point I want to talk about here is to do with sleep. You know, we know sleep is important, but are you getting enough? Are you taking all the actions that you can to really try to get the best quality sleep, aiming for ideally 8 hours, ideally every single night? Now, I have spoken about sleep before. I have a blog, and I also have a podcast. Podcast 9 on my website is about how to achieve a good night's sleep. So do go and check that out on my website, podcast 9. I've got a lot of podcasts on there now. But why is sleep so important? Well, we know from the body as a whole, it's when we sleep, the body is able to repair and renew tissues, and it's no different in the brain as well. The other thing we know is that we need to clear toxicity from our brain. And we get toxicity draining from our tissues throughout the body through the lymphatic system. And we now know in the brain it has a similar lymphatic system known as the glymphatic system. And this drainage system works best when we're sleeping. So getting good quality sleep is important. Do check out my podcast 9. And the other thing to think about, if you or your partner, if you live on your own, hopefully you'll know this, do you have sleep apnea? Do you find that you are suddenly holding your breath and then, you know, snoring because you've held your breath? Sleep apnea is depriving your brain of oxygen, and your brain needs a constant supply of oxygen. Sleep apnea is not good for cognition. It is not good for brain health. Look into treatments for helping with apnea, because there are certain things out there that can really make a difference, and you really want to make sure you're doing everything you can to protect against that. Number 3 on my list is taking care of your gut microbiome. No surprise that I'm talking about gut microbiome. Some studies, admittedly, it's still limited, but as we know in the microbiome space, studies are coming out more and more and all the time in all aspects of health. But it has been found in some studies, limited, that those with Alzheimer's have a less diverse range of beneficial bacteria. And I can assure you that everything that I'm learning about in the microbiome space is all about diversity of your microbiome, of the beneficial bacteria, and of course, minimizing pathogenic bacteria. But we need as much diversity in the gut as possible. And we achieve this diversity from eating a very diverse plant-based diet. And this does not mean it has to be vegan or vegetarian, but we need a very, very high intake of plants, herbs and spices in particular. Collectively, they go on, oh, excuse me, should have had that on silent. Collectively, they go on to support and feed and fuel the microbiome, support a robust gut microbiome and gut, so the gut barrier, that's just as important, the gut mucosal barrier. We should be eating 10 different plant foods a day, 40 different plant foods in a week. I've spoken about that a lot. And my podcast 41 blog on my website was in March 23, but my podcast 41 really talks about the importance of gut health and the brain. So do check that out as well. Number 4 on my list is movement, exercise, and fresh air. And whilst you may like, and I do this myself, is going to the gym and going in the studio and doing some intensive exercise. But that in itself is not really going to support your brain health. We need to be moving frequently throughout the day. We do need fresh air on top of that. So walking and exercise outside is absolutely perfect to do that. And what we know is that this movement throughout the day is obviously, of course, helping to oxygenate, again, the brain. But we know that this movement is really helping to keep glucose metabolism under control, helping support the uptake of glucose into our cells, helping to protect against insulin resistance, helping to keep our blood sugar levels stable throughout the day. Number 5, making sure you have a low sugar, low starch diet, really following on a little bit from what I was just saying there. But also what we know is, well, what you may not know, but what I've heard is that they're beginning to call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes for very good reasons. Insulin seems to progress amyloid plaques and does other damaging things with regards to the progression of Alzheimer's. Too much detail and technical detail to go into here. So when we think about a high glucose, high sugar diet, that increases the levels of insulin. We know we need to keep our insulin levels stable, our blood glucose levels stable throughout the day for all aspects of health. But we now know it's really important for our brain health. And just like insulin resistance, if we don't take care of that, we'll go on to progress to type 2 diabetes. Similar thing within the brain is saying if you don't take care of insulin resistance, you are more likely, and it may lead and enhance the progression of Alzheimer's. So starchy foods like your rice and pastas and your breads and bananas and potatoes, we really need to keep those to a minimum. And fruit as well can be very sugary. And of course, all the sugary foods that you know about, we may think about them as being treats, but we really need to recognize that the less we eat these foods, the more able we are to keep our glucose levels stable, our insulin levels stable, and therefore really helping to protect the brain. And my final point here is, are you trying to implement as much as possible into your day-to-day life calming techniques? We know we lead stressful lives. The modern lifestyle is very stressful, but stress is also a risk factor for Alzheimer's. High circulating levels of cortisol that comes from chronic stress or a stressful lifestyle is really negative to the brain health and may progress into one of the risk factors for Alzheimer's. So what techniques are you implementing day to day? And it's about finding what you like, because there's no point trying to do something that just doesn't agree with you, because that was likely to enhance your stress levels. So it's finding things that you do like. You know, there were many things, I've talked about a lot of these things before, but you may find some meditation helpful. You may like yoga, gardening, watching something on TV that makes you laugh, going for a walk, picking up the phone to a friend, having a nice bath, listening to relaxing music, those colouring books that can be very, very calming to people, keeping a journal of gratitude. You know, we need to be encompassing these things: yoga, tai chi, whatever it might be, swimming, dancing. We need to find time every single day to have some time in our life, in our day-to-day life, when we incorporate these. And when we know we're going through a particularly stressful time, or a particular time of the day when we feel stressed, what are you doing to catch that, recognize it, go away and do some deep breathing, or any of the things I've just mentioned that are going to help the body switch from its sympathetic stress mode into the parasympathetic, calming, rest and digest. And we need to remember this and do this as much as we possibly can. So that covers all the top tips that I can talk about tonight in my limited time here. I covered a lot of this at my recent retreat, which was all about how to live a naturopathic life for healthy aging. And so these are no different for helping to protect your brain as well. I could talk about nutrition. I've talked about omega fats, but I have no more time tonight, and it's definitely something I will come back to talk about the really important nutrients that we need to help feed a healthy brain. But I hope that's given you a starter to really focus and think about. And just remember, the leading cause of death in 2022 in the UK was dementia and Alzheimer's accounts for 60 to 80% of dementia. So it's really important to take care of all these aspects that I've just mentioned. Hopefully that's been helpful. I look forward to catching up with you next week. And don't forget, all of my lives are converted to videos in my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles, Natural Health, and also podcasts on my website, Peyton Principles. So thank you for watching, listening, however you are, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.